After Art, Mel, Kat, and Aaron left for Israel, and Eric left for Tuscany, the rest of the group spent the afternoon moving vehicles into the new hangar. They planned to leave them there until they could register the titles. Once they created a legitimate corporation, they could put all the vehicles and all other titles under that name. 10 minutes after they moved the vehicles to the new hangar, and returned to the old one, the 6 specialists arrived in the Bell helicopter. Mark asked Julie, Carrie, and the hackers to join them in the office. Once everyone took a seat, he turned to Julie and asked her about her assignments related to Europe, specifically about her involvement in certain banks that handled clandestine accounts. She said, I have infiltrated several of the main branches of several banks, and specifically, I'm well known by the president of Silica Bank, an Italian bank in Geneva, Switzerland. I assume you want to hide a considerable amount of money, right? Yes, and we need you to infiltrate any one of those banks so we can move money around without suspicion. Can you do that? Of course, I will do that for you. 6 years ago, I was sent in to infiltrate Silica Bank within its Swiss office. We were investigating the finances of a man by the name Carlo Santiago. He was a billionaire who owned a casino in Portugal. He was a mobster and had several US citizens murdered. One was a congressman from Idaho. I was brought in as an acting VP of operations to President Nicola Bernardi, by the US government. Portugal wanted Carlo out of business because he had too much influence with the government there. At least half of the government was under his thumb. Portugal asked the US if they could deal with Carlo on their behalf. The US could have assassinated him, but one of his soldiers would have stepped up and taken his place. So, the best way to deal with him, before they assassinated him, was to wipe out his bank accounts. No money, no heirs. They gave me all the security credentials, and access to every system used by the bank. As I was there, Nicola approached me, asking me if I could help him with another issue. A local politician was blackmailing him. Mr. Bernardi was skimming the accounts to the tune of $100 million. The politician's accountant caught him and the discrepancies. It was minor how it related to that politician's account, but a discrepancy nonetheless. He started blackmailing Nicola for a large amount of money. Ramous let out a big yawn. To which she replied, Am I boring you, sir? Not at all. I find this interesting. Okay, I'll condense the story. I suspect it must be someone's nap time. No. You're good. Let me make a long boring story short. I took care of President Bernardi's problem. I made it look like a banking error and we distributed all the money back to the rightful owners. That distribution included all the money Nicola had skimmed and $900 million belonging to Carlo. I sent $50 million to Nicola, provided he did me a favor in the future. I have him in my pocket, and despite that, he's a good friend, and we like each other. Those entities affected by the skimming were grateful for the windfall. Behind closed doors, they praised Nicola and the Silica Bank, which generated several new accounts. So, I'd love to go back and work with him, but I need to call and tell him what I need. Was that quick enough for you, sir? My name is Ramous, and I found your story interesting. Please forgive me if I appeared to be bored. I was not. I'm ready for more, if there's more. Oh, by the way, there are billions of dollars that flow through his bank without question, and it has a fantastic reputation for being discreet. Since Mr. Ramous is now a fan, I can explain what happened to Carlo. We put Carlo Santiago out of business and delivered his business to the Portugal government. They now own and operate the casino. His own people later murdered him. So, how much are we talking about? Zoe said, we have just over $3 billion. Also, we're managing $2 billion for the Israeli military. Currently, we have those funds in Swiss, concealed accounts, with Unicredit Bank. If Bernardi is as indebted to you as you say, wouldn't it be prudent to move all our funds into his bank as soon as possible? You could disperse our funds into smaller accounts that would bring less attention, but you won't have to do so with the Israelis. You can put their funds into one account. They'll run their own interference. I wish we had talked 2 days ago. Julie answered, that's no problem. I can call him right now if you like. Mark said, use the office next door. There are several burner phones in the desk, in the right top drawer. Julie, this is a big commitment you will be making. If you have different plans, you need to back out now. It's your choice. Mark and friends, I can do this from wherever I live. Since I don't have to be in a specific place to access your accounts and manage them. Once I decide where I plan to live, you can just set me up with the equipment and security I need. Then you can send any one of these 4 boys in to get me situated. We've all worked together in the past. She left to call her friend Nicola. After she left the room, Mark directed his attention toward the hackers. How are you guys? You heard that. Can you get Julie set up? The shortest one, Dennis, the one that looked like a 14-year-old kid, stood up and said, no problem, we have done it several times. The other 3 agreed as they discussed the process and the equipment they needed. Mark interrupted, guys. That's not what we contacted you for. First, I want to ask if you had made plans once you leave Tuscany? Nick, the one sitting next to Dennis, said, we figured we would start a tech company. We didn't know what was available to us yet. Mark said, okay, that's great. When we get the corporation set up, we want to contract with your company for our IT services. It's our plan once the corporation is up and viable to hire all the gens. We plan to do it in such a way so everyone can live anywhere they want and work for us. At least everyone will have shares in the company. We've considered anyone who wants to start a business as a subsidiary of the corporation. I assume many want to settle and not worry about business other than the business of their garden. That's okay too. Like I said, everyone will have shares in the corporation. The interest alone will make everyone wealthy. So, for example, if you wanted to run a bakery, we can set you up in business under our umbrella. Your computer company will be a subsidiary. All pertinent companies will be international and owned by the parent company, when and wherever we establish it. Do you understand? Chuck, the tallest and previous supervisor of the 4, said, yes. That's perfect. We have talked about it, and we plan to stay in Europe. We talked about establishing ourselves in Denmark. Is that possible? Mark answered, anywhere you guys like. The other 3 started an argument with Chuck about who was deciding to live in Denmark. Mark quickly ended the argument and said, there's one other thing. We need to re-establish communications. Right now, we have a hub in New York where all our private calls are routed. It's in a storage unit in Brooklyn. It will suffice for a little while longer, but we need you to set up a new secure communications center where we can contact one another without mishap. We want it done outside the US. We need to bounce the signal from places like South Africa or Argentina, places that if they traced it, it would only lead them to a relay system. We want to use several redundant relay systems around the world. You could set the main system up in Denmark, should you live there, but get Julie set up first. After that, Mark turned to Carrie. Hello, young lady. I'm always happy to see you. Dee reached over and slapped him lightly on the back of the head. Quit flirting. Okay. Okay. He winked at Carrie and said, what can you tell me about the status of our gens? Have you been talking with them about aliases? Carrie had the most fantastic photographic memory of all the gens. In her mind, she knew every detail about everyone. After the group left Tuscany, she started talking with the other gens gathering information. Carrie was always involved in operations that required a great deal of memorization. Every gen trusted her, knowing that she kept things to herself. She was responsible for creating identification and supporting information for operatives in the field, and tied it together so perfectly, no one could prove a person wasn't who they said they were. Anyone else often forget one detail or another, but not her. Others' forgetfulness, on more than one occasion, caused an operation to fail because an operative was found out for lack of supporting documentation. But she never had that problem with her work. Carrie answered, I have been talking and gathering information, but there are several who haven't decided what they plan to do. They were excited at first until they realized there was no plan on how you guys will make it all happen, And it's not that they can't figure out how to survive on their own, but you should have told them how much money you have available for resettlement. That would have gone a long way helping them make those decisions. Zoe said, "We didn't have all that money until just 2 days ago. We had enough money for everyone to have a new life, but not in a way we can now. We plan to use $1.5 billion for the gains to create new lives. That's more than they need for the rest of their lives. The interest alone on that kind of money should provide about $2 million to each person per year." Carrie answered, "Let me go back and explain to the Gens what the situation is now. I'm sure over the next couple of weeks we can establish placement and new identifications for everyone. No one responded in the past because it was unclear how we plan to accomplish that, and we need to get moving because the neighbors are getting too nosy." Mark asked, "Do you have all the equipment you need to create new identities?" "We have what we need to print physical identifications, but we will need a hacker friends to hack agencies and hospitals to create electronic files." "Okay. Go back and relay the situation to the rest of the Gens. We will need the hackers here until we can get Julie set up. At which time we will send them back to you." William, the fourth hacker, spoke up, "It will only take one of us to set Julie up, maybe two. We don't need the apron strings of each other to do these kinds of things. Most of the time, we work solo. So, you can send Dennis and Chuck back with Carrie." Chuck retorted, "Shut up. Will, I prefer to work on the banking system. You and Dennis can go back with Carrie, Nick and I'll stay here." Will argued, "Why can't you send Nick and Dennis back with Carrie? I prefer to work on the bank system rather than government documents." Chuck looked at Dennis and Nick. Nick answered, "I don't care, either is fine." Then Dennis said, "Me either." Chuck said, "Okay, Mark, I guess that's settled. We can use the computers that are there now to do things like print legal documents, but we will need better equipment to do anything else. The old machines do have internet access but they're outdated. If there ever was a computers in 1950s, most of the PCs there could be their European cousins. So, we will need to shop for equipment for Tuscany and the banking system too. Can we purchase the needed equipment now?" Mark turned to Dee. "Can you take these hacks around to the computer store and help them out?" "I'd love to, Honorable." Dee and the hackers took the van to purchase the equipment for both projects. In the meantime, Julie returned to the office, telling the group things were good with her and her friend. "He will do whatever I need him to do. So, I'm now a vice president in charge of operations for the Rome branch. You should see my salary. On the downside, the first thing I have to do is demote a fellow employee. They can be dangerous in situations like this, always trying to cause problems out of anger. I'll end up firing him." Carrie asked, "Got anything to eat, Mark? I'm hungry." After she said that, they all stood around looking at each other as if someone should magically produce dinner. There was only an empty fridge in the hangar. They didn't want to bring any attention to themselves by all of them going to a restaurant, so Zoe went into the supermarket to buy hot dogs, skewers, and fixings. Someone set a 55-gallon barrel on the side of the hangar and built a fire in it previously. It was time for a hot dog roast. Carrie built the fire, mainly because she likes fires. Zoe returned just as Dee and the hackers got back. So, they set a table up next to the barrel with all the fixings for their hot dog roast. Carrie looked around at everyone and said, "We are such typical Americans. New lives will take getting used to." Ramous, although quiet through most of the conversations, expressed an idea. "I want to toss this out there and see where it lands. When you finished the mission for the Israelis, I was sure the general was going to ask you to do something else. I could tell it was right on the tip of his tongue. Although he didn't, I'm confident he will. We will miss an opportunity here if we don't use it to our advantage." Mark asked, "What do you mean, Ram?" Dee interrupted, "Ram is on the right track. Why establish identities all over the world when we can establish everyone in Israel with the help of the Israeli government? We can offer our services, and they can offer us citizenship. I suspected the same, Ram. I could tell it was right on the tip of his tongue. Since Israel is full of immigrants, It would be easy to get us established as Israeli citizens. I hope I didn't steal your thunder, Ram, but I wanted the group to understand that you and I were thinking along the same lines, right? Exactly, D. It's an easy decision. Chuck, the tall hacker, spoke up. That would be so easy to do, especially if we had unfettered access to their systems. Carrie agreed and could create identities for everyone based on Israeli citizenship. They asked Mark to talk with Aaron and the general the next morning. They all agreed, just before Zoe broke out the marshmallows. Dee asked Zoe, "Did you buy stuff for s'mores?" "It's all in the bag, Dee." There was so much going on, no one thought about staying the night. So, Ramous and Mark drove over to the new hangar and brought the two coaches back so everyone could have a place to sleep. Zoe and Ramous stayed out at the fire late into the night. It was nice and quiet, and it seemed the fire comforted them. They had been moving and thinking at such a high pace for several days. It was nice to relax, even if it was just a fire to watch in a barrel. Zoe whispered to Ramous, "I can imagine this fire burning on the beach right now." "Me too, Honorable. Do you remember that first night we sat on the beach, and I put my arm around you?" "Yes. That was the night I fell in love with you. I think that night started all for you and I. I wish we were sitting on that beach right now." "Are you ready to return to Oregon?" "I don't know. I have been so caught up in things since we came back, that I haven't thought about it. Actually, I find myself wondering if we will ever go back. Perhaps I should give the property to Peter and Emily and start a new life at the vineyard. I'll never go back as police chief. Maggie has already proved herself to the city. They might like her better than me. Just like you said, I'm beginning to feel out of touch with Oregon. Ram, maybe, once we get Julie set up, we can make a casual trip back. We could take our time, instead of hurrying. I would enjoy that. We can walk on the beach, build a real campfire, and see how it makes us feel. Right now, the feeling is soft and warm." The two of them kept the fire going for another hour while they discussed what kind of life they wanted to live if they didn't go back to Oregon. There was so much money and so many properties. They could live anywhere. Ramous asked Zoe if she could teach him how to fly. Everyone else knew how, except him. She reminded him there were a lot of things everyone else could do that he couldn't. "Of course," she said it while giggling. To Ramous, she was so beautiful when she giggled, but then he thought she was beautiful all the time. His life has changed in so many ways he could never have imagined, all because of Zoe. He was always in charge, and that's the way he has lived his whole life. Now, he was following everyone else and often had to stand behind the action because of his limited abilities, compared to the Gens. He needed to figure out how he could be more involved. Standing back did not work for him and never has.